Hi guys, namaste. So a while back, we had our first little introduction to the 8 limbs of yoga according to Patanjali. You guys had great reactions to it, and we promised that we would start to slowly come and investigate those concepts a little deeper. I sincerely believe that those are concepts that we spend a lifetime, or many, many lifetimes, investigating, as they are such subtle concepts. I think they are much more subtle than what normally is attributed to them. And it should be, because life is never black and white. Life is always so full of contradictions and contrasts that we have to really have a huge commitment to observing our own behavior in order to see if these concepts can actually help us around. The very first of the limbs, if you remember, they're called yamas. And yamas are, there are 5 practices that we are supposed, the 5 things that we are supposed to avoid doing. So it's not, I think that many times, I think I said it before, it's interpreted as there is an authority, a God or any kind of authority that tells us you should not do that because that is wrong, and that people will very often kind of respond to that very quickly. It's like, oh, like you're not supposed to steal, you're not supposed to kill, you're not supposed to sleep with somebody else's wife, you know, all these things that you're not supposed to do, and they kind of work by themselves. But I think it's much more interesting to look at these practices as things that actually lead us to suffering. It's not so much about someone who's telling us not to do something, and therefore we have to listen to them. But then, speaking for myself, I always have this rebellious side. You know, if someone tells me not to do something, I know that at a certain point I'm going to have to do it. It's an old rebellious teenager in me. So I think it's, for me, what changes is when I understand this behavior will lead to suffering. This behavior will perpetuate a feeling about myself, about life, that does not bring me any wisdom or well-being. And therefore, we're trying to take that out of our lives. That speaks to me much more than don't do that. So it's just not wise to do it. If you want to live this life as best as you can and enjoy it and help others enjoy it as best as you can, then some things are going to stimulate and support us in that effort, and some things are going to not support us and actually disturb us in that effort. And the very first of the yamas, so the yamas are the don'ts, let's say. So like this stuff, try to get it out of your life as much as you can. Try not to invest in it. Try at least to observe it so that you can refrain from certain activities. And the very first one, I think, is also immediately the most complex. It's very famous, it's ahimsa. Every time you have an a in Sanskrit is a no, it's a negation. So ahimsa is a violence and ahimsa is non-violence, meaning that we are trying to make our lives as non-violent as possible. And lots of people immediately interpret it as, you know, being a vegetarian, not eating meat, being always kind and being always sweet to everybody. And I think that the sense of kindness and sweetness is behind that too. The problem is that it can also lead to a lot of hypocrisy, you know, in the sense that I'm speaking from experience, as I notice in my colleagues or in people that I know, that a sense of you know, being a yogi and being kind becomes an external approach, whereas inside there is just as much violence as before, and maybe even more, because now you are suppressing something, so it's of course going to leak out on the other direction. I also think that there is a major misunderstanding between violence and aggression, and they are not the same. Aggression is sometimes necessary in life. You know, I sometimes only go into practice because I actually kind of kick my own butt a little, like, come on now, do this. Sometimes you need a certain aggressive effort in order for things to move on. And if the motive behind the aggression is a good motive, a noble one, a motive that of I want to do the best in me, I'm just too lazy, so I need to kick my ass a little bit here. Or if the motive behind it, you know, a mother knows that very well, that sometimes she needs to be aggressive with the child because the child needs to understand, needs to be given limits. The motive behind that aggression is the best one. So aggression has a place in our practice. Violence, on the other hand, in my interpretation, violence is when we take that aggression and we use it for selfish purposes. Like we have a desire that we want to fulfill, and someone is somehow stopping that, or someone is in between me and my desire, and I act violently towards it to get that person out of the way. Violence is when, when a person, when a parent is treating the child aggressively, not to educate the child, but to somehow unleash their own issues and their own aggression and their own self-hatred onto the child, is a completely different thing. So the intention behind the aggression is going to determine if that aggression has its place, and if it has its place, it has to fulfill its function and be removed, or if that aggression is actually turns into violence because it's just a selfish perpetuation device. So this is an incredibly difficult thing, because we can justify our behavior so easily. We can so easily say, like, well, I screamed because it takes a lot of going inside and say, I screamed because I was just upset. And I was upset because my ego was touched. So those things, it's much better to be honest and recognize that we are violent than to lie to ourselves and pretend that we are very, very peaceful and actually keep on doing that, which is going to, in the end, lead us and others to suffering. So it's an incredibly tricky one. There is a story I want to tell you. I tell that a lot in the teacher trainings. It's about, I heard it from my own teacher, Paul Greeley, and it's a story of two clans of samurai. Samurai, these Japanese warriors. And then one clan one day massacred the other clan, completely killed everybody in the clan, the families, the children, everybody. And only one man survived. He was not there at the time, and he survived. And he swore to take revenge on the clan that had killed his clan and family. And it was actually his duty as a samurai to do that. He had to do that to fulfill his own karma. So it took him years to kind of become familiar with the other clan, and he disguised himself as someone else, and he got the trust of the others, and it took him years to grow through all the ranks of the other clan until he got very, very close to the man who was actually responsible for the massacre. And then one night, as the man was sleeping, the samurai went over to him with a sword, and he was about to kill him when the man woke up, and with a lot of disgust, he spit into the samurai's face. And at that moment, the samurai put his sword away and left. And his explanation was that if he would have killed the man there after he had been spit on his face, he would have done it out of anger, out of personal motives, and that would have been bad for his karma. That before, his intention was a noble intention. He was there to fulfill his duty, fulfill his karma, his dharma as a samurai. But for the moment that he was spit and he felt his disgust for the other guy, it was now going to be selfish. So the same act done by different motivations is completely different, has completely different consequences. So that's why it's so important for us to, on a daily basis, really observe what is the motivation behind our actions. And we're going to see things in ourselves that is not fun to see. But that's the way of the yogi, is to go into these places that are normally avoided by everybody else, to make a home for yourself there, to get used to this idea that you're going to be disappointed with yourself on a regular basis. But that's the only way. It's the one step that you can take in order to slowly become more aware and hopefully also more enlightened in your attitudes. So I just would like to invite you to maybe take a week, make a little plan for yourself. Take a week to just observe, what are the moments that you slip into violence. The hardest one is towards ourselves, because those we can cover up, those nobody sees, those we can get away with without people seeing it. But those are the ones that actually plant the seed for the violent actions that we are going to have towards others as well. So just a little invitation to a self-examination for a while. Just notice for yourself, what are the places when you are violent, and can you stay in that place for a moment or two, maybe breathe a drop of friendliness into that as well. Let me know what you think. Thank you.